The Abilene Chamber of Commerce takes its responsibility as the advocate for local business very seriously. It is important that voters go to the polls with the information they need to make wise decisions. Candidates in Texas House District 71, Taylor County Sheriff, and Taylor County Commissioner Precinct 1 races were given the opportunity to participate in video interviews at the Chamber. One candidate was unable to participate. Here are the interviews.
Today we're with State Representative Stan Lambert, who represents the 71st District in the Texas House of Representatives. He's running for re-election. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
Why don't you give us a short bio?
Well, Doug, I was born and raised here in Abilene, just a few blocks down the road at Hendrick Hospital, and went to school through high school and then went to Abilene Christian University and obtained my bachelor's degree in finance and business. Started a banking career that spanned 36 years, but moved around the state, 2 or 3 small towns, community banks mostly, that I worked in and helped start back in the 80s, which was a difficult time from an economic standpoint, but those banks survived, and we moved on to end up in Ennis, Texas, where I became the mayor of Ennis, at the same time being president of a bank in Ennis, and then moved back to Abilene in the early 90s and have been back ever since. So about over 3/4 of my life I've spent here in Abilene. This is my home, and this is where my wife also grew up most of her life as well, and then our boys, we moved back here when they were in elementary school, and so they were raised here and went through AISD as well. So it's been a fun experience.
Tell us why people should vote for you.
Well, I think because of that relationship and the fact that I've been here for such a long time and been involved in a lot of different activities, not just with raising our family. And my wife's a former school teacher and elementary principal at Abilene Wiley. I served on the Abilene School Board for 10 years. This is home, and this is what I want to do in terms of giving back to my community that has been so good to me for such a long period of time. And so I think public service is an area that people just have to have that heart for wanting to give back, and I've been privileged and honored that the good folks of House District 71 have sent me to Austin now for 4 terms and hopefully for another term.
You know, the Abilene Chamber of Commerce is made up of about 1,300 businesses here in town, so business is our business. In this previous session just ended, what did you do for business?
Try to reduce regulations as much as possible. We also passed, as you know, the largest property tax relief package in the history of the state. One of the components of that property tax package was to reduce the amount of franchise taxes that many of our small businesses pay. We added about 60 to 70,000 small businesses around the state of Texas who now fall under the maximum revenue in which they are required to report and pay a franchise tax. And then for those franchise taxes that were basically zero, no one owed those taxes, we eliminated the even filing of the paperwork. So just one example at least of how we've tried to address the issue of small business, because we understand that the state is growing. A lot of small businesses are startups, entrepreneurial or opportunities here in Texas that we welcome, and certainly the state has had we're open for business policy for the last 10 to 15 years. And so we understand the significance of small business in all of our communities, the large metropolitan areas, as well as our small rural communities. And so it's important that we continue to look for ways to reduce their costs, reduce their regulations, reduce government intrusion into their activities every day, and then try to give them every opportunity to be successable.
Speaking of the property tax relief bills that went through, there was quite a price tag on some of that. It was paid for with a surplus.
Yes, it was.
That we had. What happens next time? I mean, is the property tax relief still going to be there? We don't know whether we have a surplus like that next session.
Well, we don't know exactly what that surplus is going to be, but we do have a pretty good idea that it's going to be a fairly significant amount of surplus, maybe not as large as what we had 2 years ago when we started the 88th legislative session, but Some of that, as you know, was leftover federal money from COVID. Some of that was inflation related. And so the surplus that we may generate in this next biennium probably is a lot more realistic in terms of back to normal operating times for the state. And I think that goes to show that maybe inflation has come down to a more reasonable level. We're not looking at some of the things that were the fallout of COVID, high prices on automobiles, on housing, and everything else related to the building industry. So we feel like that the sustainability will be there. And we wanted to make sure that we did not spend everything that we had in surplus, because we also had about a $20 billion surplus in our rainy day fund as well. And so keeping our spending levels under inflation growth, population growth, and the other constitutionally required things that we have to do in order to pass a balanced budget every 2 years are still there, and they will still keep spending under certain control. But I believe the property tax increase will be available in the next biennium.
What's your view on school vouchers?
Well, I've been very strongly opposed to school vouchers for a number of years. A lot of that relates back to being on the school board and being through a time when, in 2010, where the state cut about $5.3 billion out of education across the state. And on a more local level, that meant that Abilene ISD had to cut about $6 or $7 million out of our budget, which meant about 125 full-time positions. That was painful. That was not a very fun thing to go through. We had to do it because we wanted to make sure that we still did not raise taxes, or that we kept a budget that was within the realm of what the revenue sources were. So that kind of gave me a feeling of making sure that our funding was at the right place. And when I ran for this job 8 years ago, I felt like making sure that the state of Texas, which is now the 8th largest economy in the world, we could do a lot better than what we had done in the last several years. And so we've made some progress. We passed a very significant bill back in 2019 that added quite a bit more funding, but we're kind of playing catch up. And I think we're still behind the curve as far as fully funding our public education system. And so vouchers would create a whole diversion, or at least a whole nother bureaucracy that would need funding, not just in terms of the vouchers, the $10,200 vouchers, but also the bureaucracy to manage that, oversee it, to send out the payments to whatever schools where parents were sending their kids to, private schools. And I just didn't feel like we were at the point where we could start reducing resources from public education in order to fund a brand new program that would be a privatization, basically, of public schools. And so that's why I've been opposed to vouchers, and that's probably where I'm going to stand for a long time.
Governor Abbott's expressed opposition to the lawmakers who voted against school vouchers. In fact, in some races, he's endorsed the opponents of the incumbents. How effective can you be in the next session without the governor's support and ability to sign bills into law?
Well, I think time will tell just how we reconcile some of those differences. I think once we kind of get through the election cycle and know exactly what who the wins are and who the losses were, we'll have a much better understanding, at least what our legislature is going to be looking like in the next session. I feel like, sometimes we have to kind of get past some of those difficult decisions and where there's conflict and disagreement, and to move on and make sure that we're taking care of the citizens of Texas, and that we're doing the right thing, and that we're still addressing the needs, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's health and human services, whether it's roads and transportation. We'll figure out some way to reconcile some of the animosity that's developed as a result of this one issue, and move on from there, because our job is to represent, in my situation, 194,000 constituents in 4 counties. Like every other representative, we have similar types of representation in terms of numbers of population. So I think we'll roll up our sleeves and we'll go back to work and try to figure out a way where we can find common ground with the governor and the other leaders in the state.
Well, it hasn't been any trouble trying to find major issues to ask you questions about. How about border security and immigration?
Border security is the number one issue. It's the thing we hear the most about from our constituents all over the state. And as long as the federal government has turned a blind eye towards doing what they should be doing in terms of enforcing the laws that are currently on the books, without sending additional resources in terms of adding more Border Patrol agents and just the equipment, the infrastructure, and so forth, Texas has obviously stepped up to the plate and tried to fulfill that void. I've began in 8 years ago. We were funding the border at about $800 million for the biennium. It's now over $6 billion. That money is being spent for additional resources, for personnel, DPS, Texas National Guard that's involved, the equipment, the drone technology that's helped us, just the amount of equipment resources necessary to try to manage a border that is the 2/3 of the entire United States is a pretty difficult challenge. But I think the governor under Operation Lone Star has done a very good job, and I think we're making some headway. But we need help. We need the federal government to step up to the plate and do their job.
Texas is growing so fast, just almost ridiculously fast in number of people moving into the state. Can the government keep up with that?
Well, I think so. I think not only do they, are they bringing their families and hopefully maybe they're moving a business or maybe they're retired, but I think we can keep up with the growth just basically because our economy continues to grow. And so as a pro-business representative and someone who wants to see small business flourish, the headlines are always the mega corporations, the Fortune 500 companies that are moving to Texas, and we are the leader in terms of the number of those companies now. But again, being a community banker, someone who has worked in smaller communities, I see the importance of making sure that our smaller businesses are growing, and that gives me the reassurance that the economy is going to continue to do well, even though we may have some slowdown, we may have some dips in terms of the cycles that go through economic activity. But I think Texas is poised to address those needs because of a very pro-business atmosphere, because we have a very low tax structure. We do need to continue, I think, to try to find ways to give back some property tax relief as we did this last session. If we have enough surplus, then I think that's something I've already heard the governor talking about in terms of the next step. So I think as long as we can continue to reinvest those excess resources back into the state, the growth will continue to occur. It's always something to go to some of the larger communities and just see how much construction is going on, how many cranes are in the air. The roads are sometimes down to single lanes, and so you know that there's a lot of activity going on. And some of that's catch up. You can't always predict far enough in advance to know where the interstate needs to be widened to 6 lanes or so. But I think overall, I think Texas has done a pretty good job. We need to make sure that we make those significant investments, though, from a rural standpoint in things like broadband and things like water resources, and things that really matter to our rural areas of the state. And so that's where I'll be focused. That's where I'll be concentrating on making sure that we get our fair share of the allocation of that surplus.
Yeah. We're just about out of time. Do you have some final comments you'd like to make?
Well, I just want to say I'm so honored and humbled to be the representative for my hometown, a place that I love so much, where I grew up, have so many friends from so many different things that, from high school all the way through college and in the business community and through the education community. It's just, it's been a very great privilege for me to serve, and I thank you for that, and I appreciate your vote in this next election.
Thank you.
Thank you.